Welcome to the first of what will be a long, long series of videos where I go through Bio 101, General Biology. This is a sort of a project of mine because students asked for recorded videos, and my previous set of recorded videos had terrible, terrible audio because I did them all in the class. Now, what you're about to get is me pacing about my office talking to other stuffed animals or like toys because nobody else is here but me, and occasionally a cat. But I hope that means that I'm going to give you sort of a more condensed version, a more of a clear version, and I think that's hopefully what you want. What it probably also means, though, is I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of like sidetrack stories, and I get off topic a little sometimes, but man, science is just really cool, and I want to expose you to it. So we're going to start off the course. This is obviously 1.1, the very, very beginning, talking about what is science. So there it is. There's the first question. What is science? Um, I could throw this out to anybody here, but like I said, stuffed animals, they don't really talk back. This monkey here is like, nope, nope, not going to answer, which isn't too terribly different from being in class because people don't like to answer in class. So oftentimes what I'll get when people ask me what is science is they'll say science is the study of life. And it's like, no, that's biology. It's a type of science. But what is science? And they say science is facts. Not really. Science is a process. Um, Science is a way of understanding the world. Science is, above all, testable. If you remember nothing else, remember science is testable. It uses verifiable data. That means that you've gone back, you've double checked. It involves a process. Science is a process moving along a logical sequence of observation, identification, investigation, and then a theoretical explanation of the phenomena you've observed. And science builds upon itself. We didn't know about the world to begin with. We still barely know about the world. But science you put something out there, you test it, you get some information, you share that information. And then the next person comes and they build on your information. You gave them a base to grow. So science is a testable process. Now science has an evil twin that's called pseudoscience. And pseudoscience is everywhere now. The internet has allowed pseudoscience to rapidly proliferate. Pseudoscience is, again, above all, untestable. It uses vague or exaggerated claims. You used to see all these advertisements that say things like cancer can be cured. All you have to do is, I don't know, follow this diet plan. It was untested. It could be vague. Your health can get better if you eat well. Well, what does that mean to eat well? That doesn't mean anything. Um, there's an over reliance on confirmation rather than refutation. So instead of with science, the process of science, when new information comes out, other people are going to test it and refute it. They don't just accept it wholesale because it confirms their already formed opinions. You're always testing in science. You're always asking why or how or further exploring a concept. You're not just accepting something because somebody else said it, or more likely because it confirms your pre-established opinions. You probably see that particular type of pseudoscience a lot. It's called confirmation bias, where somebody tells you something that you already kind of thought was true, so you're like, yeah, that's totally true. And now both of you think it's true, pass it on to other people, and you suddenly get a crowd of people who think something is true only because it reaffirms your already deeply held belief. Pseudoscience relies on is a lack of testing by other experts. So if you ever run into a situation or you see a situation where somebody puts out some information but says this only happens in one place in my lab and I'm the only person who can make this happen, think pseudoscience. This happened back in the 80s. There was this idea of pyramid power where in one particular lab, somebody created a copper pyramid, and they documented that pyramid in their lab, in the science lab, floating off the ground and spinning. And they said this would provide perpetual energy. So other scientists said, that's really cool. We want to see if that can happen in our lab. Turns out, the scientist who discovered this, and I use that term loosely, said, it won't work in your labs. My lab is situated on this ley line, which is this energy line on the Earth. It's the only place it can happen is in my lab. And then the other scientist said, okay, cool. What if we tested it in your lab? And he said, you can't test it in my lab. And there's this litany of reasons. Nobody else was able to replicate this. That's pseudoscientific. The guy, it was very not open to testing by others. In absence of progress, I'm not sure if you've heard of what's called astrology. And by astrology, I don't mean astronomy, the study of the stars and the night sky. I mean astrology, which is loosely the study of the way the position of the stars impacts our lives on Earth. So think your horoscopes, Pisces or Taurus or Gemini or whatever. That field developed 2,000 years ago, more than 2,000 years ago. And in that time, it has not advanced. It may have been studied at one point as a scientific field where people literally did tests to see how the stars impacted people's lives, and they drew conclusions about it. But in 2,000 years, that hasn't changed. So it's been sort of relegated to the field of pseudoscience. A personalization of the issues. When people start doing what are called ad hominem attacks, attacking the delivery message, the person as the messenger, instead of the content of the science, start thinking pseudoscience. Recently, people started attacking, I think it was Bill Nye the Science Guy. And he's got science right in his name, right? He changed his mind about something. New information came in. He changed his mind. He said, I was incorrect about that. The new evidence shows that this may be more correct. And people said, how could you? You only have a bachelor's degree. What do you know? They completely ignored the argument he was making in favor of attacking him personally. That's pseudoscience. And finally, the use of misleading language. Anytime you see something that says all or every or universally, any of these universal terms that imply some constant throughout the world, be a little suspicious of that. Now, also falling into the realm of pseudoscience, like I said, pseudoscience is testable. Pseudoscience is untestable, science is testable. It would be things like the unknown or the unexplained. And so I'm a big fan of, what is it like? Ancient Aliens, and shows like that give this sort of pseudoscientific view of the world. The reason those shows that go into, I don't know, cryptids or, cryptozoology or ghosts or aliens would be termed pseudoscientific is because there's no way that we have right now to actually test them that is an accepted way of testing. Now, some scientists or some practitioners of these pseudoscientific theories are getting more scientific in their reasoning. They might start recording events. They might get scientific equipment to measure electromagnetic fields and things like that. So you're starting to develop more of a scientific method to it. And that's great. That's where all of this needs to be going. We can't just accept things on blind faith. We have to test and test and test. Because we're scientists. Now, pseudoscience can be spawned from science. Basically, scientific ideas can become pseudoscientific when they can't be separated out from ideology. It's really easy to accept what in your mind is a scientific fact because that is just the current zeitgeist. That's the current culture. Um, let's say climate change. Now, climate change, there's a large body of evidence supporting climate change, an extraordinarily large body of evidence supporting climate change. Climate change, the scientific consensus of the world, is happening. But we don't just say climate change is happening, the end, because I think that it's important to take care of the earth, so therefore, the climate change, then the reason for that is climate change. If new evidence came about and it showed that humans were not causing climate change or the climate was not changing, you need to take that new information and reevaluate your beliefs. I'm not saying that information is out there right now. Trust me. Oh, you don't have to trust me. Go read about it. So legitimate scientific journals to find out how the world, or our most current take on various matters of public interest. So pseudoscience can come about when you can't separate yourself from the ideology, or when scientific findings are used to promote or draw attention for publicity. Sometimes a scientific study will be entirely misconstrued in order to get publicity. One study that I remember reading about, I read an article, and it was the weirdest article. It was talking about how eating peanut butter and banana sandwiches increase memory. And I was like, that is the weirdest article I've ever heard. So I read the article, and it went into how peanut butters and bananas have these chemicals in them that will increase memory. So eating peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and banana sandwiches, increases memory. And they had a citation at the bottom. Well, if there's a citation at the bottom, it must be real. Well, you pull up the citation, read the actual article, and the actual article said nothing about peanut butter or bananas. It just talked about these two chemicals that, when combined, may increase memory in certain patients in certain situations. And it happens that the same chemicals are present in peanut butter, and also they're present in bananas. Now, that doesn't mean eating peanut butter and bananas increases memory. That means that these chemicals in certain doses may increase memory. Do you see the difference there? But the article made it seem if you change your diet to eat peanut butter and banana sandwiches, your memory would increase. The article had nothing to do with peanut butter or bananas or even sandwiches. So somebody wrote an article to get clicks and to get likes and to be seen and noticed, and it had nothing to do with the science that it purported to explain. Um, Powerful individuals can conflate causation and cofactors. Oftentimes, science can become pseudoscience when people begin to say this particular situation will lead to that situation. This causes that. When in fact, oftentimes when we're looking at data, we can't figure out what variable is causing what to occur. We just know that the thing happens. So we've got to be very careful about the way other people are interpreting scientific studies. That's why it's so important for you college educated. Well, I hope you're getting college educated. College educated, well reasoning students will be able to understand the original literature, what data is actually coming out. That way, you won't rely on these people who are trying to put out information to fit their own personal agendas. Look at the original data, look at the original papers, and then draw your own conclusions. That's the way science can work. If you rely on others to interpret it for you, it reduces the authority and value of science in society. It's one of my favorite quotes from Mark Twain. It's easier to fool people than convince them that they have been fooled. And if you've ever argued with somebody at Thanksgiving, you totally understand that one. I always find that it's, let's say Thanksgiving dinner, you're arguing with your uncle because your uncle holds some antiquated views and you want to enlighten them about the way the world currently works. Well, in their mind, their life experience has shown them one certain thing. They have been, for lack of a better word, fooled. They learned one thing at one point, and that is their worldview now, and it takes a lot to change it. And you probably operate the same way. Your initial upbringing set in your mind certain ideas, and then everything else you originally you accept those ideas, and then everything else that comes into your life becomes a challenge to those ideas. My challenge to you is to constantly reevaluate your worldview based on new data coming in, because you're a scientist, or at least you will be soon. So let's talk specifically about this course instead of broad ideas of science. Let's talk about biology. So, life. Whenever you're looking at life, whenever you're looking at biological sciences, any science really, you always start off with the same question, which is why. This is why, like, preschoolers and 5-year-olds make the absolute best scientists, because they're always asking why. Our world is constantly changing, and our role as scientists is to understand the change motivators, and to observe how things are occurring. Life is always changing. Heck, evolution is occurring. It doesn't happen immediately. Well, in some cases, as we'll learn about in Bio 102, it happens from one generation to the next, but we can see changes over millennia. What we're looking at on the screen here is the rapid evolution, not rapid, the evolution of a mustard-like plant into a wide variety of other forms, from Brussels sprouts to broccoli to cabbage to cauliflower. All of these came from one type of crop that we were growing early in human civilization, and then we made it specialize. That's why all these things look so similar. If you've ever looked at cabbage and you looked at Brussels sprouts, basically Brussels sprouts are teeny tiny cabbages. Biology is where we're looking at this change over time. We're asking questions about the living world. We're using we're making a sort of an organized study of life. Over the course, over the rest of the year, well, or if you're just like binge watching these videos, I don't know, the next 24 hours, um, we're going to look at how life is organized. We're going to look at how we express and transmit genetic information, how we pass on that plan to build life, how energy is transferred from one form to another, and how organisms interact with each other and with their physical environment. As far as organization goes, there is a pecking order from top to bottom. We our studies will go from the smallest speck to the overall biosphere. In general, you can look at it as, you got these teeny tiny specks out there, the smallest um, recognizable individual units of matter is the atom, and then later in a few minutes or weeks we'll look at what makes up atoms. But atoms come together to form molecules. Molecules all come together to form organelles. These are these little compartments inside of a cell. Organelles come together to form cells. Different or cells of the same type form tissues. Tissues come together to form organs. Organs come together to form organ systems. Organ systems come together to form organisms like you. Organisms come together to form populations. Populations of which are a group of one type of organism come together to form ecosystems or communities. Then we get an ecosystem, and the ecosystems all together form the biosphere. Step by step by step, you go from less complexity to more complexity. That leads to sort of two types of ways of looking at the world, looking at science. You can do reductionism, which is where we zoom in to finer and finer resolutions. Um, so this is where you're reducing complex systems to its constituent parts that are more easy to study. That's the way I look at it. We're going to start with the individual components and put those components together. So in this course, we'll start with atoms, and then over the course of the next year, work our way all the way up to the biosphere. If we're moving in the other direction, we start with atoms. Well, if we're moving in this direction, when we start with atoms and we move up, we're going to start to see what are known as emergent properties coming about. Novel properties that occur at each level that were absent in the ones before. Let me give you an example. So the classic example is the watch. The individual pieces of the watch don't do much on their own, but it's only when you put them together that you get the ticking to occur. With us, we can think of it as think of your brain. We know the way the brain functions, but we don't know how that leads to thought. Thought would be an emergent property of that complex brain system. Another major theme of the course is form determines function. My God, people, I will say this time and time again. Form determines function. At every level of biological organization, there's a correlation between form and function. If you look at the screen here, you see all these organisms have these long wing-like structures. The manta ray, the penguin, the flying fish, all of those same structures are used for the same reason. They're to help propel it through a fluid. Don't forget, air is a fluid, so this flying fish is in both the water and the fluid of the air. Um, there's a correlation there. All of them use their fins or wings or whatever to move them through a fluid. They all have that same basic shape, which give them the same basic function. We're going to talk a lot this semester about the cell. The cell is the smallest unit of organization that can perform all of the activities required for life. And then the definition of life is something we'll talk a little bit about, but it gets a little philosophical. We'll talk about the way genetic information is passed from one generation to the next. So how DNA is formed, how that DNA has a code to it, and that code will create all of the proteins necessary for you to build every system that you need to survive, and pass it on to your kids. Specifically, we'll focus in on the central dogma of molecular biology. That's where DNA is getting translated to RNA, and that DNA is transcribed into RNA, and RNA is translated into a polypeptide. That polypeptide becomes a protein that does everything. This central dogma is basically what all of modern biology is based on. We're going to talk about how we convert energy from one form to another, how it moves through systems, how we get kinetic energy from the sun that's converted into the potential energy of bonds. Well, we don't. Plants do. The bonds of sugar that are then broken down in the mitochondria to release to build usable cellular energy intermediaries like ATP. We're going to be transferring energy from one form to another, left and right. For these types of reactions, whenever an organism uses energy, some of that energy is lost to the system. It just it goes away. So we have to have a constant source of energy coming in, and that's where we have the sun. The sun provides the energy for our biosphere, and then over the course of this semester, next semester, we'll see how that energy gets distributed through the whole system. We'll see how organisms interact with each other in their environment. This is one of my favorite examples of a keystone species. On the left, you see a killer whale, an orca. In the center, you see an anemone. You see an urchin. And then next to that, you see, to look closely, seals and, what are they called? Sea otters. For these organisms, they have a complex interplay. As killer whales, as the whale population decreased, which were the killer whales' main source of food, they had to seek other forms of food. So first they ate seals, and as the seal population dropped, then they began to eat sea otters. Well, sea otters eat sea urchins. So as the sea otter population decreased, the sea urchin population increased. Sea urchins eat kelp, specifically the base of the kelp. So as the sea urchin population increases, the kelp population decreases, and kelps are vital for providing a habitat for baby fish. So the kelp forest disappeared, so did the fish. One small change in the system ended up destroying a vast ecosystem. And obviously, organisms don't just react with each other, interact with each other, they interact with their environment. Every system, every organism is interacting continuously with physical factors, um, including us. Obviously, we're dealing with the way we engage with the environment. So there's a lot going on this semester. At the end of the content of the mini lecture, I'm going to try to present a slide called Lessons Learned. Here, these lessons learned slides should summarize everything, not in as much depth as the rest of the lecture, so don't, skip everything and just look at this one slide. But I'm trying to sort of, wrap it all back up, put it in a nutshell for you. In this case, just remember science is testable, how we can describe the world as we look at, I'm going to go through reductionism, where we're sort of look at the small parts to interpret the sum of those parts, and we're going to try to figure out how these emergent properties form from all those many parts working together. Moving forward, we're going to be moving into the scientific method and biology, biological thought in general. End of every one of these mini lectures, you're going to find content review questions. These are what I feel will focus your studying if that's what you want to do. I don't provide review sheets or anything because that's, you can do better than that. You can make your own. But I do have these questions at the end to help guide you in what to study. So keep an eye out for them. I hope you come back for the next video. You might just be scared off and never come back. Well, if you never come back, I hope you had at least a little bit of a good time with this one. I'm going to jump right into recording the next one because, yeah, it'll be awesome. I don't even know what the next one's about. We'll find out.